Okay, so we're going to do a segment now that seems very needed for a duality of reason. We have another participant in the panel that's not here. So Phillip Stutts, who is a client of mine, but also is a remarkable person in his own right. He has an advertising specialty business in DC that does political advertising, but he is held to a much higher performance standard than most because he's got to win or he doesn't get clients. And he's developed some really cool processes that we might transition into for a few minutes. However, that's not why he's here. We had a session, and we may not. One of my other colleagues he has about 1 million millennials that follow him, and we were planning on doing a duality to show you, number one, how to understand the mindset of a millennial entrepreneur so that you could relate in your practice building activities and target them. But conversely, in my preparation for this, I talked to one of the biggest companies in the whole world, and they expressed enormous frustration that they couldn't motivate or sustain great performance and commitment from millennial associates, team members, people who had the chance to go on partner track. And Phillip is very unique. He has a huge portion of his business driven by millennials. He has analyzed, he has optimized, he has a full-time person in his organization whose job is retention and maximization of the performance of a millennial. And we'll start with that. And if Ramit doesn't come, I will put the onus on Phillip to fill a duality of roles. Is that okay?
Love it. Let's do it.
Okay, so we like fluidity, and realize this. Nothing is seamless. When something goes wrong, you still figure out how to make it work for the audience. Okay, so did I do a disservice to you?
No, you did a great job. Thank you.
Okay, so let's start with this dilemma. There are accountants who want to grow.
Right.
They can either grow by finding semi-retired or retiring accountants, or they can grow by finding seemingly viable young male and female Turks that have passion and commitment and looking for a career and want to add value, which of course is the quintessential description of a millennial, right? And they don't want to text, and they don't want to be on Facebook.
Right.
And they're in the moment, and they work late hours.
Right.
And they care about their fellow colleagues, right?
Correct.
Okay. In reality, what have you learned that everybody here who seeks or will seek to harness and harvest the optimal performance from millennials for either team, partner track, any of the above? What do they need to know?
Right. Well,
and why?
Yeah, and I'll start out. It may come to shock some of my background to some of you, but before we get started, let me ask you all this. Is there anybody here who, in the course of their business, in their life, has come across someone that's a liar, a cheater, may have stolen, gone to jail? Anybody, can you raise your hand?
Anybody who's not?
Right. All right, so there's not much difference between the political world and your world. So we're on target this morning. So we're all on the same page to start. Look, this is a great topic, and I'm excited to talk about it because, in a way, I sort of stumbled into it. Let me give you real quick background, and then I'm going to address everything, and hopefully I'll give you guys some really good insights. I've worked in politics for 22 years. It doesn't matter on the party stuff or where I believe or anything like that. That's not really the point of this. What I'm here to do is talk about, I created a digital marketing company in politics. We now do a lot of corporate work as well, but we created it less than 3 years ago. And I created it, and the funny thing is I heard Jay speak before I created this company, and he is one of the reasons why we have this company in place. But I really wanted to create a company that was based on service to the client. In politics, that was the biggest niche, is that we have a lot of marketing companies, and they all are horrible at servicing their political clients. And so I said, well, that's the niche in the marketplace. I'm going to create this service company. We're going to give you, if you run for office, we're there 24/7. We'll create the greatest service ever. And that was the founding sort of pillar of why we created the company. So then we started with one employee. And, you know, I realized I had to hire a bunch of people to get started. And the people that are in digital marketing right now are millennials. And all of a sudden, we started picking up new clients. And the premise behind the company was absolutely spot on. We started, what I like to say, we picked up the low-hanging fruit. Political candidates and organizations were firing their marketing firms and hiring us because we were all about giving them great service. And then we added on incredible creative and incredible...
May I ask, because I think it's very interesting to define and delineate, what did great service to that market look like? Because everyone's got really abstract definitions, but they don't really denominate it.
No, that's a great question, because what happened was a lot of these marketing firms that are competitors in my market space were hiring millennials, and these millennials didn't want to talk to the client. The client would call and say, hey, we need some ads placed, we need updates, we need a website built, we need all these things. And they would take 4 days for the millennial to call back. Or they would just email them, and there was, a lack of context, and they would get frustrated. And so the basis of the company was, we are going to be for that client 24/7. We're going to have so much great service that if they called us at 3 a.m, we're going to jump on the project. We're going to do whatever we can. That forced me to hire the right talent. It really forced me to hire the right people. And because my market is millennials, all of a sudden that came into play where I went, oh, shit, I've got to figure this out, because, we can't hire the wrong people. And so, as Jay alluded to earlier, we ended up hiring a culture director, because the whole company was based on a culture of service. And that culture director came in, and we started putting these pillars in place. One of the things we did early on, and I think is a good takeaway, is we put a very, very crazy hiring process in place.
Which is?
It takes about 6 to 8 weeks if you want to come work for us. Now, when we didn't have a reputation, and we didn't have clients, and we didn't have employees, that was very hard to hold true to.
But you did?
Well, we did, because we had to hire the right people to serve the clients, and we knew that was the long-term play. In our company, not only if you apply to work for us, or we get a referral, we will not only call your references, we'll call every job you've had. So we're going to know. And the bottom line is, we have to know that person have a service mentality. They have to take 2 personality tests.
What are they?
They are Zero Risk, which is a company out of Texas, and they take the DISC test. And then we get an analysis on that. And
tell them what it is, because they don't all know.
The test?
Yeah.
Sure. The prospect for the job will come in and take these tests. They take 20 minutes, 30 minutes each one. They ask these insane questions that you cannot, you can't say, all right, I know this is a service company, so I'm going to write how much I love service. It asks these crazy questions, but all these people have analyzed all these tests. Basically, we get these tests back, and they tell us, does that person have a service mentality? Is that person going to serve the client? Do they want to help their fellow employees? How do they look at their job? And one of the things that kept coming back, which is so interesting, is the millennials, they wanted fulfillment. They wanted to feel fulfilled, and they wanted a work-life balance.
Did you get... I like to take things to ultimate granularity.
Let's do it.
What does fulfillment mean to a millennial?
It means a whole host of things. And that gets into, and I'm going to answer that, but I think I've got to give you a story.
Please.
And the story is where we stumbled really hard. So it happened this year. We're running along, and I'm patting myself on the back that we're doing so great, and we're growing this company, and we're hiring millennials, and everything's going well. And then my culture director calls me, the founder of the company, the sole owner of the company, and the CEO, into her office and says, "We have a problem with 2 employees and you." And I went, "Excuse me?" And she said, we have a problem. 2 employees have complained about you." And I said, "For what?" And they said, "Well, they made mistakes with their clients and you called them out." And I went, "Yeah?" And they go, "Well, it hurt their feelings. They didn't like it." I'm 43 years old. I'm 43 years old. And I didn't grow up that way. I had people that dictated, bosses that dictated to me when I had jobs, and I had to go do the way they wanted to, and that's my mindset. That's what I've modeled for so long. And I got really pissed. And then I sat down and decided to think about it. And I said, I got this wrong. They're right, I'm wrong. And this was the fundamental change in our company when it dealt with millennials. I cannot, if that employee is going to work under me the way I manage, and I get 50, 60, 70% efficiency rate out of them.
As opposed to
understanding how they work, how they function, understanding what guides them, what pushes them, what motivates them. Could I get that efficiency rate to 80, 90%? And so what I did was, I decided to create, as Jay said earlier, a retention marketing program in my company. We're a marketing company that markets to our own employees. If you're an A player to my company, we have a host of things that we do. We have profiles of every employee to understand how they're motivated, to understand what guides them, what motivates them. Now, if you're a C player in our company, you're not going to last very long. And so let's exclude them. But if you're an A player and a millennial in my company, I have an obligation to manage them in the way they need to be managed. I reverse engineered everything I'd ever thought about. And so we have these profiles. We understand everything. And I'll give you a great example. We created the BPI program. So our company is Go Big Media, and it's a big personal impact, BPI. And if you're a great employee at our company and you do great things, we want to reward you from time to time, not at just the end of the year. And in the employee program, profiles, we understand their family, their anniversary dates, their childbirths. We want to celebrate all of those things because it may seem like that doesn't matter, but it does matter to them. That is important to them and the employees. So what we did was we had one employee who came to this company, and we didn't know whether he was going to be an A player, C player, or whatever. He exploded when he started working for us. And last year, we were in the heat of the election, and he was working 24/7 for us. And we knew from his employee profile, he loved his grandparents. His grandparents were in their 90s, and they were getting really old. And he was stressed out by working, but thinking about they were ill, they were going into the hospital and out of the hospital. And so our culture director sat down and said, hey, this employee, we love him. He's an A player, and he's doing everything he can to grow this company, and he loves his grandparents. And I said, I got an idea. Let's send as crazy as it sounds, like a $500 bouquet of flowers to his grandparents. But we wrote a personal note to his grandparents that said, this employee loves you so much, and all he talks about is how much he loves you. He is the best employee we have here. You should be so proud of him. And we sent that to his grandparents who were in the hospital. He came into the office 3 days later.
You didn't tell him?
No, crying. No one had ever done anything like that. I mean, I'm getting choked up about it because the employee profiles, this isn't calculated.
Yep.
Like, we care about them. He said, and that's more than giving him a $5,000 bonus for great work. It's funny, when we ran our profiles, we found out some of the millennials in our company care less about money than they do in work-life balance.
And what does that mean?
So what that means is that they want to be more effective. They think they're more effective and more efficient by not being in the office all day long. And so, we have perks. Perks are different than culture, but we have a great perks list. So 2 weeks of the year, any employee can work in our company remotely anywhere in the world. They can go anywhere in the world and work. That's important to them. That makes them feel like we care and we're thinking about how they're motivated. Look, the bottom, and we just had another story, real quick story, Jay. One other one that was really interesting. 2 weeks ago, another incredible, great A player on our team came to us and said, look, I've been approached by another company, and they want to give me a lot more money than I'm making right now. And he said, but I'm coming to you guys first, not to counter, but to be upfront with you. First of all, that's incredible. An employee comes to you and just says, I want to tell you that I've been approached, and I want you to be aware of it. And then he came to us afterwards, and he said, they've offered me a lot more money. And I turned it down. And I said, and I have, by the way, I was just a side story. I have no problem with anybody leaving my company. None. Because if they're an A player and I'm not serving them and I'm not meeting their needs, they need to go somewhere else. That's my responsibility.
But that's being preeminent. And Ramit, come on up. I didn't see you here.
Ask you a quick question. What about the employees who complain? How do you fix that?
He asked, what did I do about the 2 employees that complained? I took them out to coffee. I heard them out. I listened to them. I didn't talk. And I apologized.
Deservedly, do you think?
Yep.
Okay.
I had to change my psychology.
All right. And hold on one second. Ramit Sethi is one of the top respected influencers to millennials. What do you have, 1 million followers? And he established a very good discipline, you'll all like this, of helping them be physically judicious in managing their finances. He sells financial programs, growth programs, but he won't even allow anyone to buy if they have credit card debt. He wants to teach people how to be physically prudent and create for themselves financial security. So we're going to go to his side in a minute. Continue.
Yeah, thank you. And so, look, we just reverse engineered how we thought. The senior staff doesn't dictate. We understand how they think, and then we manage to each individual employee. And that was the key difference in understanding how successful we could be with the millennials that work in our company. We started with 1 employee less than 3 years ago. We're up to 20 now. We've grown 500%. Another program we put in place is we give a certain percentage of our profits to charity. And what we ended up doing, we created a foundation, the Go Big Media Foundation. At the end of the year, every employee submits to us what their favorite charities are. And then we cut a check and we distribute it evenly among the profit that we'll give to the charity that they want.
So they feel, and do you,
then
the
the donation comes in their name.
So you do it in their name. That's smart.
And so we give, we've grown the company again by 500%. We're now in 4 states. We started in DC. And I will tell you that reverse engineering how we think and how we work and how we try to deliver for our millennials is the key. Now, I will tell you this. It's not always successful. The part of the culture that's hard is that my employees are like my kids. No matter how great I sit here and brag about our culture, they're always going to try to find a way out. They're always going to try to find a way to break the rules and not do it right and complain. That's okay. That's what life is. Like, I'm sorry, I complained when I had, horrible bosses, or I had complained when I had good bosses. It didn't matter. You're going to find that.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. Then I'm going to flip, if Ramit got to listen, ask him for context, even though this isn't the topic you usually talk about, but it's interesting to precipitate new perspective. But let's translate this to a distilled, simple, at least foundational guideline if they're trying to recruit, retain, and stimulate optimal performance, loyalty, passion, purpose, and longer term sense of connection with the company. What would you tell them to do or to do different, and why?
Well, you have to start with your strategy. What is it? It's not just hiring millennials. It's not just going to some job bank. It's not just, hey, we need to fill this spot. you've got to create a strategy of how a foundation of how that person works, and what are you trying to get out of them, and what do they want to get out of you? I mean, there has to be a plan in place. You have to think about it. You know, one of the people I've worked with is a guy named Keith Cunningham out of Austin, Texas, and he always talks about thinking time. You spend 30 minutes just writing out an answer to one problem. And I would encourage you, if you're going to take one step, think about that. How would you address this if you need to start?
And why?
Well, why? Because, look.
No, for them, why?
Why?
They need to know why they're doing something.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of it. It's a whole purpose. Look, if you know, it starts for me with culture, and we had to create a foundation of culture, and then we had to build it. And man, there were stumbling blocks everywhere. That just happens. That's just business. But here's the deal. So I talk about this marketing retention program. We've now taken it to our clients. So every client we have a marketing retention program to them. We understand all the people
So they're
we deal with.
marketing internally to
Right.
their A players.
If we have a client, we have to deal with, let's say on the corporate side, the marketing director, the CEO. We learn everything we can about them, and then we deliver. And it's weird. It's in different ways. And I want you to think about this. It's not just giving them gifts. It has nothing to do with it. It has to do with, like, there may be a marketing director who wants to look good to the CEO. So we will produce value-added memos, an idea I got out of Jay, and we will brag about the marketing director and send the memo to the CEO. And that guy, it'll light that person up. And now the next thing we're about to do is take it to prospects for our clients. So we're going to create, a free audit to audit all their marketing, any company's marketing for free. We'll just hand it to them. They don't have to hire us. It'll tell you whether they're doing the good corporate marketing or bad corporate marketing, whether they're saving money or losing money. We've just kept expanding that model, and it all started with trying to figure out millennials.
Okay, now stop, and we're going to move to Ramit, and we're going to ask you a duality. You're here for a primary reason to help them understand the mindset of what would be a millennial entrepreneur. However, you listen to this, and I'd be very intrigued to see what insights you might have stimulated that might be additional.
Yeah,
Is it on?
absolutely. Is this on? Okay, great. So I'll give you a little bit of context on my business. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
please.
I love listening to Jay. Every time I listen to Jay, I pull out my notepad and write down words that I've never heard before. My business, I started it back when I was a college student. I had learned about personal finance. I had invested some of my scholarship money in the stock market because I thought that's what you do. And I quickly learned I wasn't as smart as I thought. And I started reading a lot of personal finance books and watching the shows, and I learned what was real and what was not. And I ended up getting pretty good at personal finance. I wanted to teach my friends in college, and they'd be sitting around the dining halls and they'd be complaining about their overdraft fee or credit card perks or something. And I would say, hey, I can help you with that. Why don't you come to my 1-hour class? And it was a free class. And I told them I had 4 sections. I still remember: banking, budgeting, saving, and investing. I hate those words. And so did all my friends. I didn't understand why, but everybody said, that sounds cool, I'll come. And then they never came to my class. And I don't know if anyone here has had experience where you put something on that would genuinely help somebody and they just don't come. It can be very frustrating. So I did that for about 1.5 years, and these were free. I was just doing it I wanted to help people because I had gone through a lot to learn it. That didn't work. So I finally said, these lazy college kids, maybe I'll just start a blog. And that's exactly what I did. I started the blog. I wrote as if it was you and me sitting around having a beer, talking about money. I would tell jokes. I would talk about myself. I would talk about crazy stuff on Wall Street. But it was very relatable. I wasn't doing technical analysis or anything like that. And it took about 6 months, and finally people started reading it. And I was a very brash kid. I remember emailing the Wall Street Journal. I said, you guys are good. You're pretty good. But you need somebody to help you understand young people. I'll do it. I'll even write for free. And they did not reply to me. So I kept emailing them. And one day they actually wrote an article. I still remember that day I got 9,000 visitors, and that really put me on the map. So the blog ended up, I wrote a book. Book did very well. Ended up going on book tour. And when I went around the country, I asked people, what do you want me to write more about? And they said, love your stuff on personal finance and automation, but I want to know how to earn more. So that ended up spawning an entire course curriculum in business, and now we have over 1 million readers a month. We have dozens of employees. We are 100% distributed, so we don't have an office. And we can talk about that and how building a culture across a distributed workforce can be good. It can also be very challenging. But I would say that from listening, I agree with everything you said. My key insight from building a culture for whether it's millennials or our customer base, our target is top performers, whether they are millennials or older. I would say that 80% of the work is done before their first day starts. So that is who you are recruiting, how you are recruiting. A lot of times I think I see companies trying to put the sell on when in reality, really great millennials, or anyone for that matter, they want to know the truth. Like, here's what's good about the job, here's what's going to be challenging. And really telling them, there's even great examples where managers will try to dissuade someone from joining and be really honest. And if they still join, then they're going to be very, very committed. I like to be very transparent with what's good at the company and what our challenges are. That way, when people come in, they don't feel like there was any lack of transparency. So that's number one. 80% of the work is done before their first day starts. I completely agree that millennials want to be challenged differently. And there's a different set of expectations. Some of those can be great. There's a lot of my team wants more responsibility. Some of them want it in different ways. Some of them want to be VP in 1.5 years. That's a challenge, and we could talk about that. And then finally, kind of listening to what motivates them. So I'll give you an example. We have some people on our team, and I really love this. They said, Ramit, I would like to interview you once a quarter as part of my contract. I'd like to put it in the contract. So they wanted to interview the CEO once a quarter. I said, that's amazing. And think about the kind of person that asks to do that. That person is probably going to be very successful at their job. So I was thrilled to do it. Of course, I agreed. But I said, I will do that. But in exchange, I would like you to write your notes up and share them with the whole company. So I think there's a lot of business process that we already do as business owners or senior directors or managers that would actually be incredibly interesting to millennials if we were to actually productize those things. And I use productize loosely. We turned that into an information dissemination process. People loved it. The person who was doing it became kind of a hero, and it was a win-win. So those are some of the basic principles I've learned. Happy to go in any direction you like.
Okay, so talk about, we want to target millennial entrepreneurs as clients.
Okay. And what's the challenge doing that so far?
I don't know. I think the challenge is that from a practicality standpoint, there's not a lot of knowledge, proficiency, specialization, understanding, differentiation, and awareness of what's important to them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are lifestyle, so it's a lot. I mean, go ahead.
Can I ask the audience?
Yeah.
So what are the challenges when it comes to acquiring millennials as your clients? They're not organized. That's true. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Not organized. Okay.
Even though millennials are painting in a broad brush, there must be label or variations within that group.
Yes.
I don't understand that.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so there are probably variations. We can't paint them all with a broad brush. Great. Yes, sir. Yeah. Right. They can't afford it. Great. Anything else? Yes, sir.
So one of the points earlier about doing international work, this idea that just go out and work anywhere and do what you like. We have a lot of trouble communicating that you can't actually do that under circumstances. Putting people at risk, the company risk. So kind of holding them back to make sure that they don't put themselves at risk in the challenge.
Right. Okay. So communicating and mitigating risk. Okay. Great. So, who here has spoken to a millennial potential client in the last 96 hours, in the last week? Okay, about 30% of the room. What do you think they'd say about you? I'm serious. What do you think? Who's got an answer? What would they say? Yes.
I would say they like that I'm not.
They like that you're not a baby boomer. Okay, all right. Okay, what else? Yes.
So can you stand? And we don't have a mic, but and
I would say that you're old and you don't understand.
Okay, it's just 1 second. That's an interesting answer. You're old, you don't understand where I'm coming from. Can you go in a little bit more detail about that?
They think that they know the answer to everything, and that I have to convince them that I know what I'm talking about, and I don't get where they're coming from.
I see. Okay, okay, got it. Yes, sir. Okay, he didn't know he could talk to an accountant and have fun. All right. I have a great time talking to my accountant. So, okay, a couple of things I just want to illustrate. Number one, asking questions, right? I legitimately wanted to hear the answers. I thought they were very interesting, and I think everybody here found it interesting what other people did. There's value in that. The first thing that I want to demonstrate is it's very easy to sit in your position or my position and kind of think that I understand my clients or the audience, but I really don't, and I need to hear it from you. That's number one. Number two, productize that. What I mean by that is turn that into something that other people can access. The fact that we're all here in the room, that was actually really interesting to hear things about, my client doesn't think that it's fun to talk to me. Whoa, that's a lot of ideas. What can I do with that? And then the third thing that I would say in terms of reaching millennial clients where they are, and by the way, we have, I would say we have about 800,000 people on our email list. We have a lot of millennials. We have over 30,000 customers, and many of these customers, they join our premium video courses, and a lot of them do it to learn about growing a business, copywriting, marketing. Some of them join some of our other programs. These programs are relatively expensive. They're a couple $1,000, sometimes $10,000. There's a few more inexpensive ones. I say that to let you know that there's these sort of generational things that people talk about. Millennials don't have money, they don't want to invest in themselves, etc. I don't believe it. I see it every day in my customer data. There's a lot of millennials who are serious, they're willing to invest, they have the money if you can provide the value. And I asked the second question, what do they think about you? Because one of the classic things I see with people trying to serve millennials is you're writing in a way that your industry talks in. So I've seen websites that say, minimize risk or tax minimization. It's like, that doesn't mean anything to a person who's starting their business or has, $2 million in revenue. They don't understand what that means. So speaking to them and asking them, like, what are your concerns? Tell me what you and your friends are talking about when you guys talk about business at the back of a bar. And then using that advisory council that you might create to really craft your marketing, your services. If they believe you don't understand them, then you don't understand them. And I would sit down and spend, if I'm having a conversation, if it's an hour, maybe 30 to 40 minutes of it would be listening and saying, oh, it sounds like this, and reflecting back, oh, I worked with a client who did that. Keep going, talk more. I want to hear him talk, and that's going to craft the offerings that I have as well as the marketing too.
Ramit, how would you reach? It could be national, it could be localized. If you wanted to reach millennial entrepreneurs in any kind of a strategic way, in any kind of discipline, what would you do?
Well, my general philosophy with marketing is start off. So I wasn't as sophisticated as to create like a full strategy for recruitment when I started. I kind of just stumbled into my business, and over time we had to build strategy and a mission and vision and values. If I were going to try to be strategic about recruiting, my philosophy is find 10 people that love you, right? They're with you, they're committed, you have a personal one-on-one relationship, these are your clients, you're talking to them, you guys are laughing together, you're understanding their business. And then I would, as I started to understand those 10 people and the insights that they gave me in my business, I would expand. How would I do that? Most millennials are online. I mean, they're all online. So I would be focusing my efforts there. And that actually eliminates a lot of traditional marketing that I see firms doing. But when I think about online, I think about influencers. I think about, you could do online ads. It becomes kind of difficult to do that. We could talk about that. Blogs where there are big millennial audiences. I mean,
What would be an example?
well, I'll give you an example that might not be directly relevant, but these days, anyone who has a book or a product would rather be on the Tim Ferriss podcast than on the front page of the New York Times. Okay. And that is a complete change in media. Now, I'm not saying you should all go pitch Tim Ferriss. What I'm saying is there's a lot of different, Life Hacker is where your productivity nerds are going to go and read. There's a lot of different sites that millennials are going to, you got to do the research to know where those are for your market. But there's a massive opportunity, and those sites actually want a credible professional like the people in this room.
That's good. That's good. All right. We have about 12 minutes max. You want to ask questions?
Can I before?
Yeah, you have at
Yeah,
least-
before we jump in, Ramit said something that was. Is this on? Can you all hear me? Okay.
It is.
Ramit said something that was very, very interesting that I just took mental note. I'm going to go back and the fact that his employees wanted to do a quarterly meeting with him. All right. Think about that as a boss or an owner of a company, an employee saying, "I demand a quarterly meeting with you," not the other way around. And that is exactly the way of thinking. It's crazy. Like, that is so foreign to me or to a lot of people in here in my instinct. Well, again, my instinct has always been wrong as far as, like, I had to reverse engineer that instinct. And so that is a critical example that I think you should pay attention to, because that is that's where we are. You have to say, oh, wow, I have to listen to them. I have to hear them out. And then ultimately what he does is shares that content with his company. I think that's a really good insight.
And I think, and Ramit, you might confirm or refute this, but one of the more interesting distinctions, I think there are a lot of millennials doing lifestyle businesses that aren't generating huge gross revenue, but are making rather spectacular income. And it's a different dynamic than you're used to as a client.
Absolutely. I mean, I know many single founders of lifestyle businesses that are generating between 600,000 to roughly 1.2 to 1.3 million. And that's basically themselves, maybe a couple contractors.
Yeah.
Now, once they start getting up there, they start to say, what am I doing with my money? And that's really the question. What am I doing? It's a very broad question. So to be able to have a really crisp answer to that's not filled with fear, like, oh my God, there's all these things that could go wrong. That's not a very appealing message to people. Mitigating risk is important, but there's also presenting a path forward. What are you going to do with your money? What are some ways to manage it, et cetera?
And we're going to talk about being preeminent and taking the role of being the most trusted advisor and giving them not information, but real advice later. But I think it's really true. I think you have to look, there's the ones building the billion-dollar value tech companies, but I don't think those are as many as the ones that are doing lifestyle, but it could be making just a ton.
There's so many underground lifestyle businesses that the general media does not know about. Like I said, the people making 600 to 1.2, and there's people making even more, and nobody knows about them. And at a certain point, they wake up one day and they say, I have no idea what I'm doing with this money. It's coming in.
And you could be really an advocate, a champion, if you rethought that category and made that one of your paths. So nobody has a question? Okay, can we get a mic? Let's borrow one of these and you guys share so we can hear. And can I get another honey and everything? Okay. Thank you.
I appreciate you responding to my question about taking them to coffee. I think it's very valuable. But the question comes as a professional. I have a tax deadline and two of my millennial staff didn't deliver the tax return. There are consequences, penalty, and so on and so forth. How does, as a professional, we deal with something like that, where there are real life consequences to their inaction and what have you?
I'm sorry. I can't.
I think he's talking about if they don't perform in the timely way, because he's got compliance issues that are time critical and can't be unless you get an extension,
Right.
can't be breached.
I understand that. I always say,
But you've got the same thing.
yeah, that's where I'm going. I have the ultimate deadline. I have election day. And if my clients don't win, I'm out of business. And there could be a wave election and there could be a good election. It doesn't matter. I still have to win. And so it's how you instill in them. And again, I want to say this. We talked about, I created the company based on service, but I added another pillar onto there, which I didn't talk about earlier, which is growth. And so everybody that comes into my company now, again, we know because we've done the personality profiles and the tests, and they've gone through an 8-week interview process, and we've talked to their former bosses. And part of that is we know if they can meet deadlines. We understand if they have that mentality. But the growth mentality is that they have to want to grow. Everybody that comes to work for us has to work themselves out of their current job in 2 years, or they shouldn't work for us anymore. And we say that to everybody in the interview. And they should be training the people under them to take their job over so that they can grow to another level in our company. And the reason I say that is they have to have an education plan. They have to constantly be growing and learning. And the reason that they do that, again, this is where we get a lot of pushback, because they're like, damn it, I don't want to take another class or do another educational function or go to another conference and try to learn anything. But ultimately, what we're trying to instill is if they're growing and they're servicing, they're going to always be trying to meet those kind of deadlines.
And I'd like to make an insight. I think we're going back and forth between two worlds colliding. One is clients, one is, I think I'll trade you. There you go. Thank you. And I think they have to see that you are committed to their ultimate, optimal, maximum growth and development and success, as well as them being committed to themselves and the company.
Absolutely. And that doesn't mean that there's still not skepticism on their part. There's still skepticism. As a leader, you're going to be criticized no matter what you do. So all you do is your best. And I lead with my heart and I try to do the best thing. And there's still people that quit and say, I don't believe you. You're full of shit. That's okay. I can't change that. It's up to them to be the best that they can be and to understand those deadlines.
But if you look at it, just so I had this added right in the middle because I think for all of you, you can't deny the relevancy of the duality of this market. It affects you. Whether you want to be ostrich-like or not, it affects you. It's an opportunity. It's a danger. If you can't harness it externally as clients, you're going to miss a huge emerging gap. If you can't harness and harvest it internally, you're going to be at a disadvantage to the people you're competing against who can. And they are the future, at least one gradient of the future. So who else has a question? Okay, Mike?
The question I think relates. Mine.
Can you hold it like this?
Sure, thanks. My question relates to approaching this, or being strategic in approaching the millennial audience.
For what purpose?
So I'm a new partner at an established firm that's been in existence for 50 plus years. I don't think Lifehacker or Tim Harris has yet been mentioned at a partnership discussion. But so the question might be.
Hold it closer.
The question is, what specific steps might you recommend to be strategic in approaching this, aside from setting aside thinking time and writing on it, to better reach out?
You're talking about finding millennials as clients?
Indeed.
Okay, great. Well, I like what you said about reverse engineering. I think if you have any number of millennial clients, the first thing I would do is get on the phone or get on a plane and meet them and say, tell me where you read, tell me what your friends do, where, if I wanted to reach them, where would I do that? And what are the other service providers that they do? If you have a millennial online entrepreneur, I'll just give you an example. They're going to be using services like Shopify or Stripe because that's their payment side. They might have certain technology providers that they're using, maybe MailChimp, et cetera. And I'll be thinking that's at a very, very high level just to understand the lay of the land as to where they go. Now, of course, partnerships could be one part of your pillar of your strategy, and you might begin those long lead partnership development conversations. But to simply grow at a decent rate, asking them where their friends are, where they're reading, where they're learning their information from, is going to get you a lot further than some of the traditional strategies that I've seen employed, such as advertising on whatever billboard, etc. I would say that they're connected, they're reading online, and if you reverse engineer it, you're going to get some great insights that you might otherwise not have gotten.
Yeah. By the way, most of my market are old people because they vote. So in the corporate side, we deal with a lot of traditional businesses or small businesses that aren't in necessarily the millennial space for our clients. So his insight's really good on that, by the way.
I have a suggestion, and I want to take your thinking to a spin. So there are local firms, colleagues, there are regional firms, there are national, international firms. If you can isolate, if Chandra can isolate localized firms who have done a meaningful job at either or, recruiting, retaining, optimizing millennials internally as team members, junior partners, whatever, and ones that have done a good job of acquiring millennial clients. You don't have to recreate the wheel. You could either figure out what they've done and either license what their methodology was, at least short term, and rather than you license, you want to have fun, license it for everybody else and turn it into a revenue stream, or partner with them if it's legal. But I'm always, what I try to do is highest and best use. If anyone's figured it out and their knowledge base, one of the things we'll teach later is there's 9 drivers and one of them are process, procedures, systems. If somebody's already got a process that's working, even if it's not perfect, but it's like the one-eyed man in the land of the blind, and it's a hell of a lot better than yours, and they're not going to be in your market anyhow, or they're a limitation because they're seeing local and you realize you can do it all over the country or the world, then learn it. Pay them something for it. Who cares? Okay, we got, who's got a question?
I'll preface my question with a surprising revelation that accountants really, really suck at marketing.
Really?
But I have a question for Ramit specifically because I think you would have some insights here. You said when you started, doing your coaching, financial coaching, you were leading, you were phrasing it in terms of banking, saving, investing, budgeting, not totally non-sexy. That's how accountants are typically marketing themselves as compliance experts. Yeah. And that's not a good way to get new clients. So if you could talk about how you maybe rephrased your marketing to actually grow your business.
I'm glad you said that because, my banking budgeting joke totally did not land with this audience, but it really should have. I was hoping it did. So when you go to a website and you see banking, budgeting, I'm like, close. That's it. You have 5 seconds, game over, done. And similarly, what's some of the phrases that you've seen on your competitors' sites? What are some of the phrases you see on their websites? Reduce taxes. Okay. What else? Great service. Yeah. Secure,
Service,
trusted.
dependable, quality.
Who cares about? None of this is effective at reaching the audience. What that's effective at is reaching somebody who's had 20 years of experience, may have been in the financial services industry, and even then it's not persuasive. They're going to come to your site because they know somebody at the firm, etc. So when I think about how I did it, so I started listening to what they were talking about. And if you look at the chapters of my book, there's 9 chapters. It took me about 8 months to get that table of contents done because that was the hardest part of the book, was how to position it correctly. I'll give you an example. If you pick up any personal finance book, do you know what chapter 1 in 99% of personal finance books tells you to do? It tells you to look at your budget and let's find out what you've been spending. And how do you think that makes people feel? Yeah. They don't even have a budget. And now you're telling me I need to create a budget, which sucks, to tell me that I've been spending my money poorly, which sucks, and then you're going to tell me to stop spending so much? Goodbye. Put it back on the shelf. That took me a long time to uncover. And so what I did instead was I started chapter 1 by saying, let me show you how to beat the credit cards. Everybody's got a credit card. Everybody hates their credit card company. And I happen to have some unique insights on what to do. And I'll tell you what I did. First of all, I used to watch Oprah. Okay, and I when I started my site, I never recommended specific services because I thought people would think that I was in bed with the banks. I'm far from in bed. The banks actually hate me. I'm on an influencer list at Bank of America. One of my friends who's somewhat senior there called me one day and told me, I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. She's like, no. It's a negative influencer list. Because I don't like Bank of America. And I call them out in my book. So, but I also, what I did, Oprah, she used to, she recommends her favorite everything. And I watched the crowds go crazy. They loved it. And I realized she's built up trust with them. And I had built up trust after writing for years and years. So finally I realized, oh my God, I connected the dots. I recommended my favorite credit cards. I recommended the exact bank accounts I use, everything. And I was nervous, but everybody said, you know what, this guy knows what he's doing. He's obsessed with the financial services industry. So if he uses it, I'm gonna use it. And that's exactly what happened. So that was number one. Number two, in the book, in chapter 1, I gave them a script, word for word, so that when they call up the banks and try to negotiate a late fee or an overdraft fee, they could just read it off the page. Now, how do you think that strikes millennials? That's speaking their language, not trust, secure, blah, blah, blah. So what I would say is there's so much insight in this room, so much. It's just a translation. And one tip that I got a long time ago was you could hire a journalist. If I were you, I would go, you're in New York City, I would hire a journalist who writes for one of these more pop sites that millennials read. And I would say, put me in a room with you for 4 hours, take everything from my head and show me how to position it for millennials. And they're gonna be able to tell you, instead of reduced taxes, it's how this client of a B2C company saved $320,000 in 2 years by doing X. Way more compelling. Same information, but presented differently. So just the key insight for me was, yes, you have to be technically excellent at what you do, which everybody here is, but you have to present it in a way. If you have to hire a journalist or you have to go talk to 25 or 2,000 millennials, it's completely worth it. Because once you dial that in, they will just keep coming and keep coming.
Yeah, we got time for a couple more after. Do you want to add? Yep. Go ahead. You pick.
Getting back to the original topic where you first started, which was service, which led us into the millennials. Accountants. I want your definition of service, because that's a word that just we kept using over and over and over again. At least my perception is many clients get their definitions that the client is always right. They came from the hospitality and food service. And one of my quotes is buy the book where the customer is seldom right. Why? Because that's why they're hiring us, because they really don't know about what we do. So that's a hurdle I found is, what do you think is our client's definition of service, and how can we better deliver that?
Ramit may agree with me on this. I make it really easy. It's give more than you take. And that is the foundation. Like, it's on the walls of our company. Give more than you take. That may sound, I mean, that's not gobbledygook CEO stuff. That's simple. The other one is always be growing. Like, it's just easy language. I'm not going to put a 5-paragraph foundation and bore people to death with it.
Well, I want to add after Ramit, but I want to hear Ramit.
Is this for your employees or for potential clients?
Sure. I understand service to our employees.
Of course.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about my clients.
Well, I think the definition lives in the heads of your prospects. So getting out there and saying that. And I think if you were to go and ask them, what do you think service means? They're just going to look at you like, what are you talking about? It's beside the point. They don't, it's like when credit unions tell me, you know how credit unions market so much on how they're member owned? Who cares? How does that affect me? What do I care about that? I want to know, what do I do with my money? I'm afraid I'm doing something wrong. And my friend over there, he makes the same revenue, but he has a higher profit. How come? He's got some cool tax trick. What is he doing? Some offshore thing? No, he's not doing an offshore thing. So I think it's a good question, and I think service needs to be embedded into what you do. But if you lead with it, it's very inward focused. The key I learned from developing my table of contents and all the programs is they don't care what my values are at the first. I need to earn the right to get to sharing my values, and I earn the right by talking about what they want. I'll give you a couple examples from the titles of my programs. One is called Earn 1K. It's very straightforward. Earn 1K. By the way, in our research, we found that we could help people earn 10K and more. Many of them have six-figure businesses now, but they didn't believe it. Because these are people who had a traditional salary, and they didn't think there was any way for them to be the kind of person who would earn 10K. So in a move of preeminence, we actually lowered the promise, even though we knew we could over-deliver, and that helped us really promote that program. Another one is called Zero to Launch. For those customers in that program, they don't have a product yet. We help them go from zero all the way to launch. So it's very user-focused, and I would encourage you to think about that. You earn the right to talk about your values later.
Okay, so let me give you, because we're going to run out of time. We actually have, but I have a slightly different approach. First thing I always do is get very deep Socratically to learn things about them that they've never revealed, and to ask questions that are deep and fascinating that no one's ever asked them, and to not tell them, but to show them connections that are self-evident and that are really profound, that really, really impact them, and then do a takeaway and ask them then to ask me questions. But the first thing I always do is get deep in them. It's all about them. And if you learn Socratic interviewing, it is probably the most powerful, along with critical thinking, because you can ask them questions about their business, their goals, what it does, why they do it, how they do it. You can learn some of the gaps that you can say, well, okay, you do that. Now, is there a reason you do that? And you don't have to say that's wrong just by benevolently asking in a very, very curious way. You show two things. You underscore implicitly a gap. You show that you get it, but you also demonstrate that you're not being autocratic or condemnational. You're just being curious. Okay, is there a reason you do that, not that? Is there a reason that you've only limited it to that? Is there a and when you ask questions and then embellish with curiosity, but that's really driven from supreme correlating knowledge, and you don't try to push your arrogance, I think it's very powerful. Okay, I think that unfortunately we're going to have to stop. I don't know if you guys are leaving or staying, but we're going to do another session, then we'll probably break for lunch if they're here. I'm delighted that their message resonated, and I would encourage both of them to take that message deeper, because I think there's a huge segment of not just the accounting world, but the world that needs it. But thank you both immensely. And yes, Chandra.
Did you guys learn anything new? Phenomenal. Thank you very much.
I have to run out, and I have to TV hit on Fox Business, but I'm going to come back. And if anybody wants to sit down and chat, I'll be here the rest of the day after I do the hit. So I'll be happy to chat with anybody.
Well, I appreciate both of you.